Kate Mila Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. Here, let me get situated here. It's time for our Saturday book, and I think a lot of people are going to be really pleased after a 6-month wait. Book 3, oh wait, let me start that over. Book 3 of the Convoluted Universe. This is video 1. I'm going to confuse myself later and upload them in the wrong order. This is the 3rd in a series by Dolores Cannon. Back by popular demand. She's very, very, very popular. And I read this book 6 months ago. So let's see if I remember any of it. It's going to be new to me too. So the Convoluted Universe begins with a proverb, which already I wrote a psalm. I said it was a psalm. It's a proverb. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Now this is a big book. So this is going to go on for a couple of weeks because there's no possible way that I can do 9 or 10 videos. I used to try to do that when I first started, and it's insanity. So, all right. Cannon uses, as we all know, hypnosis to communicate with the subconscious, the higher self. This is what is called by Freud the universal mind. And section 1 is called Let Us Go Exploring, chapter 1, My Evolution. And some of this is going to be familiar to everybody, but it never hurts to do a little review. She said she first got involved in reincarnation through regressive hypnosis in 1968. She developed her own technique, doing it a slightly different way, and had consistently used that method from 1979 on. She was able to time travel through the regression of subjects. It's fascinating to hear some of these stories. You get a little glimpse into the past, and if you like history, it's entertaining. She said it was not hard for her, even though she was raised a Baptist, to accept the idea of reincarnation. Now, I know that Denise takes Dolores Cannon with a gigantic block of salt, and I'm kind of in the middle. I think a lot of her descriptions are really more metaphorical. I think that stuff that she sees is presented to her from the context of her subjects and then through the filter of her own religious upbringing. But she admits that. So let's move forward. She said she dropped out of the Baptist church. She believes that most organized churches have lost their way. But you know, it's very difficult. The apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. As a surviving Catholic, I can tell you that those thought processes pop up when least expected. So we need to be aware of the context of all of this. In the beginning, she simplified the linear concept of reincarnation, but as time went by, she encountered complications and nuances to this basic understanding. So what she was saying here is that when she first started, she looked at reincarnation as you start out, let's pretend, you start out as a caveman, and then you reincarnate throughout the linear progression of history so that your most recent previous life will be before your date of birth right here, right now, but within a more modern context. And she found out that it gets a little trickier than that. For example, imprinting. And I'll try to explain it as best as I can remember. Rather than needing to live many of our own lives, in order to learn. So rather than reincarnate multiple times in order to learn specific things, we can learn by being imprinted with the entire narrative of other people's lives, including all their experiences and all their emotions. And this is taken from the vast store of all knowledge, the library, that she refers to often. Now, this is an example, in my opinion, this is an example of the metaphors that present themselves to her, because she loved books and she loved research and she loved libraries. And so the knowledge on the astral plane, the Akashic records, was presented to her sometimes as literally a woven tapestry, and sometimes this gigantic library of people's lives. And that makes sense. It makes it easier to understand. But we're not saying that when you die, you literally walk into a library. I just want to make that clear. So this knowledge, experience, and emotions from other people can be overlaid or imprinted on our soul. And the hypnotic subject wouldn't know the difference. And it doesn't matter. This is one of the hard things to accept about stuff she talks about in this particular book especially. You don't have to live a specific life to know everything about that life, and you may feel that that's who you are, but it doesn't matter because we're all one. So another example would be parallel or overlapping lives. She says she realizes she was spoon-fed the idea that lives got progressively more sophisticated in ideology with time in between to process it. And she says the subconscious never reveals more information to you than you're ready and able to handle. And so people, when they're regressed hypnotically, learn things about themselves in little bits. As they digest it, they get more. So you don't start a baby out with a 3-course meal. That's how she puts it. So her series, The Convoluted Universe, continues as she is increasingly challenged by more information. So she may be referring back to things that she's spoken about before, but now there's more detail and nuance to it. She said there should be no judging. If you spend your life judging, I'm in trouble. You spend your life judging, you're going to come back as the thing you judge. I guess, call me Mrs. Trump. Little tiny joke there. So you are not your body. You have a body. The real you is in spirit. This is all what Dolores learned. Lives are lessons and adventures. Earth is a school. You cannot skip a grade, but you may have to repeat a grade until you get things right. What goes around comes around, and this is starting to include Hermetic principles, laws of the universe, maybe stated a little more simplistically, but it's all there. What goes around comes around. What you did to others, you have to in some way balance that karma. And what they did to you, they must also repay. And that doesn't mean if you kill somebody, then you get killed. It's not quite like that. But you always have to face your mistakes. It's the law of cause and effect. It's the law of balance, karma. So her advice was resolve your baggage now, because you're carrying it around with you, and it's not going anywhere. You're going to have to deal with it. You can release your mind with love. You can release this karma with love. And she says there's no real evil going on here. These are all lessons. And so we define behavior as good or bad, good or evil. What really matters is the lessons that you learn from it, and the goal is good, as in not hurting other people. So what we call evil is people using energy in a negative way. It's kind of a fine distinction. She says you can't blame other people. You can't blame the devil. You can't blame your parents. You have to take responsibility and learn from these lessons and evolve. There's value to exploring past lives, and it is to identify these repeating lessons that you haven't gotten right yet so you can recognize them and move on. So this life may have been a burden of karma from past lives. That may have been the purpose of this life, is to work out past karma. And the slate is never wiped clean until the debt is repaid in some way. The quickest way to repay karma is to forgive, especially to forgive yourself. And she said she's seen a connection between cancer and suppressed anger. And she's speaking karmically, so just file that away. She often sees that hypnosis helps people reach into their higher selves to discover the causes of diseases and to heal on a spiritual level, to heal themselves physically on a spiritual level. She connects them to their subconscious, not in the psychological definition, but in a higher self, a we sort of definition, a metaphysical definition of higher conscious. Another author made her see our bodies merely as a house that encases billions of cells, like a huge colony of beings, and each individual entity. So what she's saying is, see us all as a body, and we're each a cell in that body, and we're a we that make a collective, a part of a greater consciousness. And in the margin I wrote, plasma? Is that what we're talking about here? This sounds suspiciously like that scientific description. So each part is independent and each part is interdependent, and we are cells in the body of God, if you want to use that metaphor. Everything is about communication and the accumulation of information and communicating it back and forth. Our job is to take this information back to source. So we are created as individual sparks of light to learn and then to return with that knowledge, with that information, to our source. Many people feel the separation from the source, and in the same way that our cells communicate their information to us as their source, as above so below. So what she's saying is there's a parallel between our relationship to our source, we as individuals, and our connection to each other is mirrored in the way that our body has cells that interconnect and with each other and communicate with us, as above so below. We are huge and all-powerful and unknowable to our individual cells. So we are like, a god to our body parts. So our many lives are unaware of our greater soul experiences and the fact that they are part of a larger unit. Most people don't remember. In book 2, she talked about the fact that the sun accumulates information from the storehouse of earth, which comes from all its living beings. And there are streams of plasma energy connecting, going in both directions between the sun and the earth and the universe, the sun and the universe. Actually, physically in physics, there are. So there are many suns and many universes, and they're all doing the same thing, and they're all interconnected. There's a cycle of rebirth and regeneration that applies to all life because all life is energy. So what's really interesting is this book was written in 2008, and she's talking about concepts in plasma physics that have been made for public consumption only in the past little bit of time. It's 2023 going on 2024. So, there's been quite a long time, and she is writing this book in 2008. Well, it was published in 2008, but it's an accumulation of information that she received over the decades. So I think it's interesting that it seems to agree with recent scientific theories. Where am I here? She said even stars and suns die and are reborn. And so our universe is. It's the same. So we are far more powerful than we know. We need to remove our limitations. And this awakening is happening. And it's interesting because I've been doing a little exploring of Paramahansa Yogananda, which I know a lot of you guys are really familiar with. Knew a little bit about him in the past, forgot it all. I wasn't ready, and now I'm reading it and I'm going, oh, yeah. It always resonated for me, but a lot of the things that he talks about in the way of healing energies and the connectedness to the universe, it's all plasma physics. It's really kind of remarkable, but I'm digressing. Chapter 2, summary of typical cases. So typical cases under hypnosis, they use hypnosis as therapy to address real issues, phobias, pains, whatever. So from 2006, she has 2 cases. And I don't remember any of this, so this is going to be reliving it for me. This man was recalling the beatings that he got from the age of 2 to 18 and how much anger he had towards his father. And a woman had no memory before 17 years old. She had suffered abuse. YouTube doesn't like us to get any more specific than that. Draw your own conclusions. From her father, from the time she was 4, and had a lot of anger, and went on to an adult life of sex work and substance abuse. She attempted, I'm trying to be very careful about what I say. I'm not making light of anything here, but there are certain phrases that are not approved of, and I'm treading lightly. I'm hoping you guys will give me some leeway here. So she had attempted that and had been institutionalized. She had to have a kidney removed. She was into self-harm. She was very depressed. She slept a lot, and she was really trying to destroy, her vehicle. So both of these subjects were able to go forward with hope after being regressed and understanding why they were in the situation they were in. Now, for the man who had great anger towards his father, in trance, he was in World War I, and he lied. He was lied to by recruiters. He was sold a bill of goods about signing up. And he describes a horrible battle scene, which I won't go into. He lived to be an old man, but his own brother was killed in the war, and he felt guilty because he talked his brother into signing up. So in the present life, his brother was reincarnated as his father. And as his father, he was feeling this anger and resentment that the brother felt for being convinced to go to war and then dying, and wanted to punish the man, the hypnotic subject. The subject was able to forgive his father now that he understood it, and he actually became a changed person when he understood the larger reincarnation context of their relationship. That's so interesting. Then this woman who was so self-destructive discovered in trance that during World War II, there was chaos as soldiers attacked and killed civilians. She was a doctor trying to help, and she was also attacked and killed. And in this life, her father had reincarnated as one of those soldiers. So this life was intended as atonement, but he went off the rails, got sidetracked by, the distractions of the physical world. And being human is simply not easy, and it can waylay even the souls that come with good intentions. So he accumulated more, negative karma. So the subject, the woman, had a job in this life to to help women who were victims and to forgive him. So knowing that helped her to move forward because now she had a purpose. Cannon found these a common story of child and domestic abuse related to past lives in religious communities that taught the necessity of suffering to get to heaven. There was a connection there with the past. Vows taken in other lives have great power and often manifest in a new incarnation in a different way. Vows of celibacy and poverty can carry over and cause sexual and financial trouble in this present life. Kind of makes you look at your life and wonder, why am I not rich? It does make you wonder. The subconscious often tries to wake you up, and even bad accidents are intended to get you to change your direction in life. And there's a channel on YouTube, I've mentioned it before, just write in near-death experiences, and they are individuals describing their near-death experiences, and many of them will be in these horrendous accidents that completely turn their lives around. Very interesting. It's not really malicious, to have these bad things happen. It's not your spirit world being mean to you, but it's part of a larger agreed on plan usually. The plan made between lives with your guides, and some people don't believe this is what happens and some people do. I think that might be a way of explaining positive and negative energy and karma. What do I know? But I think it's important to remain open-minded. People will put their own language to something that they're trying to understand, and it may not line up exactly. We're not all on the same wavelength, but the reality of it all is the same. And so it's important to keep your mind open. And she said there's these agreed on plans. If I don't get the lesson of this life, then I want the stakes to get higher so that I can deal with karma. That's really interesting. Or maybe wake up to someone who has forgotten their life purpose or their karma, that these hypnotic situations will trigger them. So when something bad happens, ask, what did I learn? So I'm still struggling to understand why my toilet, dishwasher, and water heater all went out in the same week last week. What did I learn? Then she had a subject, a woman in her 50s who had severe liver and pancreatic disease, and she was going to die because she was too sick for a transplant. She refused to accept this, and she received alternative therapy that seemed indeed to help her. And in trance, in regression, she had one life where she was jilted at the altar. She had hoped for this marriage to be an escape from a poor and neglectful family, and then he left her at the altar, and she returned home and died of grief. And in a previous life before that, her fiancé was killed in a farm accident, and she died alone in her 40s. In her present life, illness is a subconscious attempt to avoid the loss of love by making her too sick to allow a love life. It's almost a self-protective mechanism. So alternative therapy turned her down a path of metaphysics and more productivity. Then Cannon had a subject who was a man who was very depressed and very isolated, and in trance, he had been born into a family of 12 children. I share his pain. And he felt isolated his entire life. He suffered depression and isolation. He had what's called freedom from harm syndrome. And he came to her to figure out what this was. It's avoidance, so that you don't suffer. If you don't love, you don't suffer. And his first earlier life regression was very similar. It was isolated and lonely, and he was attracted to women who ignored him in this past life and took a gun to himself. In the law of karma, Suicide is not judged. It's not, you're not punished. It's not a sin. It's not negative. What it is a premature ending to a lesson you're supposed to be learning. So what happens when you flunk in school? Go back and repeat that experience, not the death part, but the life lesson part. So you have to repeat the same circumstances until you get the lesson. And in this life, his past history, this man was repeating. So why the isolation in previous life? And she regressed him further to find out he had once been a nomad in the desert. He had been a beautiful young woman who enjoyed teasing men and had been assaulted and died. And the reason he was so isolated moving forward in his incarnations was he felt it was safer. And he also needed to experience rejection. That was the lesson he needed. So the karmic debt of suicide, it's important to know, is repeating the lesson. And, it's a temporary pause in a lesson that needs to be learned. And, churches get very judgy about it. And it's not a situation that needs to be judged any more or less than anything else. Painful for the ones left behind. The subject, Donna, was part of the LGBTQ community, and she really wanted, her partner really wanted a baby with her, and they used a sperm donor. I had forgotten this story. They used a sperm donor. They used her brother, as the brother of the partner, as a sperm donor, and the baby was stillborn. It was a little boy. They tried again, and they used a stranger's sperm this time, and they had a daughter. But the couple broke up when the child was about 8, and the partner took the child, and there was no contact after that. So this woman, Donna, came to Dolores to hypnosis for clarity. In the trance, she found out that she and the child had been together in many lives and had had great love for each other. And the separation in this life was a part of a larger lesson. The stillborn baby was the same soul that became her daughter. And the death of this baby was a lesson for other people. And the baby, after death, they said often, okay, get this right, often after the death of an infant, the soul that was meant for that body often moves on to the next opportunity. It does move on to the next opportunity, but often in the same family. Babies who died really young, or stillborn, or miscarriages. The soul that was planned for that particular body, it's like, okay, well, I'll just wait for the next one. No judgment. It's just an acceptance and a moving forward. So then there's a subject who was a woman who was in trance, found she was a man who had been killed by a group because he loved a woman who was not of his class. So it was some sort of social thing. And this man and woman were reunited in later lives, but in different ways. So you don't love... You might still be connected to you will still be connected to the same souls, but not necessarily, well, we were married in that life, we'll be married in this life. It doesn't work that way. Dreams often have subconscious memories and or messages, and they're often symbolic. So she said that you don't need a regression from a hypnotist to pay attention to your dreams. Keep a dream journal. So these are some tidbits of stuff from different sessions that she was just collating into this book. So each death experience is different and tailored by and for the soul. And there's a lesson. The soul leaves the body before the pain of the death. So, you see a horrible car wreck. It has been described in near-death experiences and in these regressions that the soul will leave the body before the damage is even done, and will hover around for a while. Souls of babies, this is really interesting, dip in and out during in utero development and in early infancy, and they can choose to stay or to go. So for a while, during pregnancy and after birth for a while, it's a toss-up if that soul is going to stick around. And in infants and in the old, sleep is a time when the soul travels. That's why babies sleep so much. They're busy elsewhere. Their body is doing the hard work of rapid development and growth. And souls are bored. They don't hang around for that. So I think this is really fascinating. And she wasn't told this just one time. She was told this many times from different people. And the same with old people. I'm sure you've seen this. Old people sleep more and more and more and more. And it's a transition period. So hell, and a lot of this stuff sounds disconnected because it is. It's bits and pieces of knowledge she was given that didn't fit in anywhere else. So you're welcome. Here it is. Hell is a construct of our own fears, and you die and you have these fears. You expect punishment. You're going to see that for a little bit, but then you're going to come to your senses and realize, okay, I'm doing this to myself, and it's gone. It doesn't last. The awareness of the greatest good quickly gets rid of the illusion of hell. It's an illusion. And then we are all part of God. Prayer is consciously directed energy. It's real and powerful. Meditation is opening up to what comes in. So you can pray while you meditate. You can meditate while you pray. It's just which direction the communication is going in. Church is not a good place to find legitimate prayer. Dolores Cannon said this. We have greatly magnified power when we focus our thoughts and direct our energy in prayer. And on YouTube, there is a book by Yogananda, which is Affirmations for Healing. And I've been listening to it when I've been falling asleep. And so I have, fortunately, it's not a continuous narrative. It's subjects that he goes from subject to subject. So I figure eventually I'll get it all. But what I was really struck with last night was how his discussion of meditation and prayer and healing and energy all absolutely are congruent with the theories that have come out of plasma physics and the philosophies that come from Hermetic philosophy. It's just remarkable how similar all these things tie together. So I would recommend listening to that book. It's free, If you punch in Yogananda healing, it pops up. And they do have a transcript under it. So if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, you can, scroll through the transcript. The idea of large groups of people directing their thought began as a legitimate use of power, but churches lost their direction and they get congregations together, and it's not being done with the right intention or the right way. It's not to say people are bad. It's just that it's a misunderstanding. Prayer is you're thinking your conscious thoughts to a specific goal, and it could be a negative or a positive goal, but positive is the greater force. So don't aim it at God. There's no gigantic entity to direct it to. Put it out there as energy for the collective. to personify God, to think of God as a thing or a he or an it, it's very difficult in our language. Our brain, we just don't have the capacity to fully understand or express it. But what she says, and what I've read so many places, is that the best we can do is to understand that God is not a personification, not an old man with a beard, not a loving mother, who, not a trinity. It's none of those things. Those are human things. It's much greater than that. So you direct prayer to the goal of a positive force for the greater good. And that's the glue of the universe. It's about surrendering yourself to whatever is the greatest good. I'm open to whatever is the greatest good. Of course, you may not like it. But anyway, praying to angels and saints, she said, is very limiting. It can be comforting, but you're limiting yourself because our brains are limited. It's just real hard for us. And it's hard to grasp these big concepts. Angels, etc., are just vehicles to reach a larger understanding. We talk about angels as souls within the sight of God. This is a human personification to try to understand. But the Force, and I'm not talking Star Trek, the Force can manifest however it can be received by the human mind. So we see it as angels. We see it as saints. But this is I can't even talk about it because we don't have the adequate words for it. Angels are an aspect of the all in the service to humanity. They have never been physical. This is not saying that they're not there and that you shouldn't connect with them. That's not what it's saying. It's just saying that we kind of minimize their power and importance by putting all this imagery on them because they're much bigger than that. Best time to meditate is before dawn. Oh yeah, right. It's before dawn, or at least early in the morning when you first wake up. And then the next best is at sunset or twilight, but any time is good. Personally, I prefer sunset, but so when you're meditating, you're receiving knowledge, and it comes with strong emotion. Inventors, this is really interesting. Inventors open themselves up to information. They think they're daydreaming. What they're doing is they're opening themselves up to connect with something greater than themselves, and they get these ideas. Or when they're asleep, the insight comes to them in a dream. And they'll often say, famous people often say, oh, that song, that composition, that artwork, that machine I made, that law of physics that I came up with, I woke up and the idea was just there from being asleep. And this is why more than one person will get the same idea at the same time. And the perfect example, there are really two perfect examples. The Salk and Sabine vaccines, they came up with that around the exact same time for polio. And the other was the understanding of the HIV and AIDS relationship. And that was a big contest between Americans at the CDC and a doctor in France. And they came up with it close to the same time. I'm not even going to get into that debate because I don't think it matters who won. I think what's good is they understood it. Inventors are not ahead of their time because time is not linear. I like that. Time is an arbitrary human construct by which we can measure our evolution. That's all it is. Everything is happening at the same time. So they're just tuning in. There's a discussion of all events and possible events happening at the same time and interacting, and we focus our linear history on one timeline because we can only do one focus at a time. And she talks about that at length. So when you tune into the past memory, you're actually experiencing a simultaneous event. Think about that. That blew my mind. You're not remembering something. You're experiencing it happening right now. Past life hypnosis does this, tuning in, and helps you to tune in more clearly. So channeling is just really a different aspect of the person opening to another part of their soul's life. You are connected to your soul lives. Channelers just tune in on one, and because of our brain, it feels like a message from an entity, but we're just tuning into some greater part of ourselves. It all boils down to self-love. It's not about, nothing about reincarnation is out of our hands. You can say that you choose or are drawn to energy in life and other people that you need to learn lessons from. This is all part of a larger plan that we've placed ourselves in this context, and then we get to make decisions. That's where free will comes in. Reincarnation is not linear because everything is simultaneous and there is no such thing as time. So all these past lives are happening at the same time. Yeah, my head hurts right about now. So reality is actually fully formed, and now is because your conscious thought is directed to now. There's other stuff going on. Theoretically, if conscious and subconscious and superconscious were all fully aware, you could go to any time in history, you could change events, and it would not change the experience for others. It would create an offshoot of a different reality. I don't know. So we choose our birth date, even when there's a C-section. We choose when we're going to be born because, as we all know now, I think, not that I understand anything about it, the astrological aspects, the energy created by the position of the celestial bodies has an energetic effect on you. So when you're born matters. And it's different for every single person because plenty of people were born exactly on the same day and time as you were, but they weren't born where you were, and that makes a difference. So it's so interesting. So inside you is the awareness of your goal, whether you know it or not, and you can discover it through introspection, meditation, etc. Your prime, ultimate, final goal is self-love, and it's the ultimate purpose of human experience is self-love. Twins are a soul agreement that's made from love, and maybe they needed a companion or help in this lifetime. They're connected literally by a gold cord, even in death. I thought that was fascinating. Co-joined twins have made the decision that they're not going to ever be separated again, or that for a time period anyway. So each of us is living on many planes at the same time, and this is called parallel lives. And it's not that your soul divides, it extends. It's a focused awareness. As you climb the spiritual ladder, you will overlap and all will become one. Rainbows are a reminder of the colors of energy, and it's a little remembrance of home. So you know that story from the Bible that God gave everybody a rainbow so that it was a promise that he wouldn't send a deluge like that again. No, he well, we know what really causes it, but I think it's a great story. You set up a way for your soul to exit your body before you were incarnated, and this fits the learning experience. And she presents it as you're sort of sitting down with a group of wise guides, and you pick a date and a time, options of different exit strategies. It may not be that physical of a thing, but it's a good way to explain it so we can understand it. Crowds have a real high mix of energies, and that energy can latch on to you and drain you. And some people are very sensitive. I have a friend who's very sensitive to that. And the high vibration of others bothers them. Other people are sensitive to it and are psychic vampires. They thrive on that. They usually aren't even conscious of it. But so it's important before you go out to sort of, put that golden light around you to protect yourself. Grieving. Remember we had our book about grieving last week, and I thought that was such an interesting book, and I think the impression I get from the messages that I've gotten is it was a great help to some people, which that was the goal. I'm so happy. Grieving holds the departed soul back, and it's kind of selfish. It's important to let your loved ones know, that they can continue to move forward. What we're grieving is our own loss. They're happy, they're okay, and we need to be glad for them that they're okay. So section 2, life in non-human bodies, and this is really strange. Chapter 3 is about other life forms. So our subconscious only gives us what we can handle. And some concepts here in this next chapter are going to be hard to digest. Many are not aware of one past life that happened ever, even let alone many. So when Canon puts a subject in a trance and they regress to a past life, the first they learn about is usually nothing dramatic. So they'll regress to something very boring and plain and mundane. And it's a gentle introduction to the reality of reincarnation. Your subconscious doesn't want you overwhelmed. Often, even when it's dull, it can answer questions like what happened to you in that life will affect this life. So it's usually about family and close relationships. And most cases, she said, of hypnotic subjects that she did, most cases, more than 90% are like that. She only writes about the remarkable ones that provide real knowledge. So she's done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these sessions, but they're unremarkable for the most part. The variety of past lives for each of us is unlimited, and it's not always on Earth, and it's not always in this dimension. Now, this is the part that gets interesting. The body is a suit that you cast off when it wears out, and you can learn from incarnating into any life form, any suit. So we have to experience life in every form. So each incarnation, no matter as what, is a valuable lesson. So she often asks why the subconscious chose to recall a particular lifetime. And as she mentions, usually it's, first of all, to go easy on you. And then as you become accustomed to the notion, to show you the lessons that you're trying to learn. And this next section is about animal lifetimes. Wendy is a subject in a trance who found herself tiny and floating on a leaf, and she says, I'm alive and I'm aware, and she has no idea what she is. She's in clear water. She can see a tree on the edge of the water. She says, oh, I'm a worm and I fell from the tree onto the leaf, which is dangerous. A bird could get me. Eventually the leaf gets caught on the bank and she crawls off and joins others like her. They recognize each other. They're glad to see each other. This is just, mind-blowing. So animals and plants belong to a different type of soul group than humans. So you're not going to go be an animal in some past life, then incarnate again as a human, and then the next life regress. It's a different evolutionary stage. They all have a common interactive bond. That's why, birds flock. They're individuals, yet one. And the lesson of being a worm, is the bad part about being confined. That was one of the lessons. And the other was the fact of group connection, how important that each one is to the group. And she's had many cases of people recalling lives as animals. A woman named Dorothy was an eagle with remarkable eyesight. They have very different eyesight from humans, and they have infrared capability to catch prey. At night, she saw an energy field, a dark bluish green like nighttime goggles, and she could switch back and forth to seeing these different energy fields. So that was kind of fascinating. Another woman remembered life as a tadpole, becoming a frog, and this was just a short experience just for the experience. She had also been a flower. So someone else was a spider and a fly, not at the same time, and had several eyes, and they don't use them at the same time. I thought that was interesting. It's like having many TV sets, multifaceted. They see wider and more detailed range than we do. That was interesting. And lately I've had allergies. Sorry. Somebody else came as a whale and recalled being harpooned and killed, and was able to relate that to symptoms in this life as a human being having back issues. Cannon talked to animal communicator and asked, how do cats perceive humans? This is interesting. And she says that they see us as swirling colors of energy that take on a form, and it's why they can see ghosts. Their whole dimension of sight is different than ours. And cats do see ghosts. It's the strangest thing. Cannon recalled a time in the 60s when she and her children lived in a haunted house, and her husband was in Vietnam and had they had no choice but to stay in this house. They named the ghost George, and the cat would stare up the stairs at George for ages at a time, to the area where they would hear the ghost moving around. She has even regressed people who remembered past lives as rocks, and some were even air, and some were even inorganic. And there were lessons to be learned in all of that, and the lesson for us is that everything has a soul. I think I'll do one more chapter. So chapter 4, different life forms. The land of the giants. So this John, in trance, saw himself as a large, very tall man with blonde hair. He was wearing brown canvas pants held up by shoulder straps. He had a puffy sleeved shirt, sandals made of bark, and a sword to use against those bigger than he. And he smelled bread baking in a cottage of a small, defenseless group of people. He was bringing them deer and flour. He felt an obligation to protect them. They were half his size. He lived in a mountain above a village with a view, with a rock structure. And he had a family. The even bigger people lived on nearby island in stone castles. They came in iron boats in the spring and the fall. They had guns, and they killed just to kill. And they looked like they had bulldog faces. They came from a red planet, and they had to leave the planet because the atmosphere had been destroyed. And he grew too big, and he died. And when he died, they burned his body in a boat and sent it out to sea. And the lesson was to respect yourself and respect others, to love everything, no matter its size or disposition. He was of a people seeded here from another planet, a cold Viking kind of country. They were 9 or 10 feet tall. Their growth was a genetic defect. Their descendants still are here, and they tend to be tall, but they're not abnormally tall. They're just on the taller side. The castle was on an island under the mud, and in 2004, somewhere around Iceland, now this was told to her before this happened, artifacts will be found. The ships, the iron ships they came in, were spaceships, and they are also under the mud in Iceland, and someday might be found. She was told that most legends and fairy tales have some basis in fact. In 2002, she put Wanda in Seattle under a trance, and Wanda saw a group of beings who glowed. And she said they were like energy beings. They were related to nature. They were spirits like fairies. They protected the trees. She left that life, Wanda did, because she was upset because she couldn't save the trees and the animals from human beings. The Council of Light Beings advised her on her next life choice to become a person to help nature. She's shown this life to know that even one person can make a difference. Canon learns that we all must experience being a nature spirit before we become humans. We are guardians of plants and animals. And there are real and older culture. They are real, and older cultures saw them, but they avoid people. There are elementals, which is basic energy that doesn't have a solid form. They exchange energy with places so you can sense them. And these energies accumulate in areas and buildings. And, I think we all know that. She's told that fairies are not small. Those are nature spirits, but there's what people call fairies are not fairies. They're nature spirits between a fairy and a human, that fairies are something else. Fairies are large and human-like, and they're more connected with nature. They enter the human realm, they use elements, and they combine earth, air, fire, and water for their purposes. They look like odd people. Fairies know they are not human, and that they can come and go. Betty, a woman she put in a trance, realized that she's on a strange place that's not Earth on the surface, but she knows she should be underground where all the people live. They are miners from another planet. They're not human. She says they look like huge like bugs with multiple arms and a football-shaped head and pincers for jaws. And they have eyes on the ends of antennae, and they can see in all directions. They have 4 legs, 6 arms, 3 body segments. They're brown. They have a breathing device on their chest, and they have an organ of communication. They wear special suits on the surface because the radiation in the atmosphere affect them. They're too close to the sun. Betty is a man in this case. He's special. He's from a lineage of a house of communication. If a communication beacon outside on the surface breaks, he can still send signals from his body, but it will kill him. They don't eat. They are born with reserves on their body, and when those are all gone, they die. They have a short life of mining. They're mining some kind of stone for somebody else. Not clear. Not clear what. They're born on a ship and they're dropped off to work. They have no emotions. This is what I have a hard time understanding. When life is over, they will become light and be able to do whatever he wants to do. And they're born knowing that it's temporary, and they don't get all verklempt about it because they know it's short, temporary, and good things are coming. People on the ship grow workers genetically altered for specific jobs, and the people on the ship are not spiritual beings. They don't see the spirit of the workers. They're not thinkers, they're not humans. They're kind of like androids. They have no spirit. There are beings with spirits on the upper decks of the ship that he never saw, who are a highly trained team. It's a very diverse group of beings, at least 200. They're hired onto these ships. 4 out of 8 in a group of planets are part of a mining conglomerate. So they have this mining conglomerate, and there's a mixture of beings from the planets, some of them with souls and some of them without. They have kitchens, showers, libraries. They don't have books, they have holograms. and they have a variety of genders. A beacon outside sends a signal 3 days away to send more workers and pick up the dead bodies to recycle and to pick up the ore. And they use ore for fuel elsewhere. It's a peaceful sharing agreement. They work creatively with sunlight and the stone to create beds that magnify light, and they use the energy to light their homes and to power their vehicles and to create power plants. It's a controlled society. It's peaceful, but sterile. There's not much joy. There's not much going on there. They discover that he's different, and they try to open him up to see how, and they get hit by a pulse of light from his body because he's special, and it knocks them down. He's able to use the light to memorize all of his surroundings, to pass on his knowledge to future generations. The light creates new things, and that's also plasma physics. A divine mind uses it to expand and deepen, and this information is important to bring about change and growth. He's part of a group in the light who will decide together where to go next. They're always expanding, always learning. The lesson of this particular life is versatility of things. They're not always what they seem, that we're in a state of oneness, and a communication of love and connection to the all is important. Canon is told that God is not an all-knowing being. It's a compilation of all human knowledge and experience. And it's constantly searching and creating. There's a desire to keep learning, and it uses information to create. There are millions of universes in which to explore, expand, and return. Endless possibilities. So I'm going to end there. It's the end of that chapter, and we will continue in a moment with number 2. So thank you for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this. This is like I never read the book. It's been so long. So it's interesting too for me. Thank you very much. Slán go fóill, slánte.